Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down.
All right, here we are, folks.
Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in us. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna light it up tonight. We're gonna light it up tonight. We're gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We're gonna light it up.
Welcome back once again. This is Chris Report, and he assured me that since Simon's down in Boulders, folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa.
Let's bow our heads in prayer for the demise of the African National Congress. Dear Father, we shall not miss this beastly creation that has betrayed the liberation struggle. Welcome back to the program, folks. Survey out from the Brenhurst Foundation today. That's crooked. Hang on a second there. There we go. Oh, there we go. There we go. Had to change the time because it was spring forward, daylight savings time here in the United States last night, so I had to jump forward the clock there. Welcome back to the program. It's 1 a.m. here on the East Coast, 7 a.m. in South Africa, and I guess that'd make it, 6 a.m. in Europe? Does that sound about right? Yeah, 6 a.m. in Munich and 5 o'clock in the UK. Welcome back to the program, folks. The demise of the African National Congress. Is it too soon to call a lid on the ANC? Perhaps, but one thing is certainly clear. My projections the first week of November 2021 for where the ANC will poll nationally in this election appear to be becoming more and more likely. As you may recall, I said that the ANC will poll no better than 38 to 42%, 42% best case. Of course, that was before 18 months of daily massive load shedding, the number of people being murdered jumping from 50 plus to 80 plus per day, and the pervasive corruption that we see each and every day from the ANC. So here you have it, folks. Brenhurst Foundation, we're going to run through these slides and talk about the current situation. Now, this is one poll, but the Brenhurst Foundation, founded by wealthy South Africans, some of whom I've met here in the United States in the past, including Greg Mills, nonetheless tends to be pretty reliable when it comes to this sort of thing. Is it wishful thinking? No, it's an implosion, and I'll tell you why. No one foresaw the formation of Jacob Zuma and the Umkhonto we Sizwe party. After all, Jacob Zuma is banned from holding office in South Africa for 5 years because of his criminal conviction and jail sentence. However, he's a personality, he's a force, and the Zulu vote for ethnicity, apparently not for competence. And that's what's happening. The ANC is imploding, as I predicted in KwaZulu-Natal when this party formed, and it's happening beyond KwaZulu-Natal now. And who are the losers and who are the winners? We're going to talk about that. The big losers are the ANC, losing big time, Inkatha Freedom Party, Action SA, and the EFF, all losing, while MK, never appearing in the polls before, now polling 13% nationally. 13%. The Implodes Party, 13%, is a shocking development. One could expect them to poll 13% in KwaZulu-Natal and perhaps even in Gauteng, where there's a number of Zulus, one of the larger ethnic groups, because they've migrated up there, but not throughout the country. This is a shocking figure. It also indicates overrepresentation of how they're polling in KwaZulu-Natal because it's such a populous province. Nonetheless, the ANC is collapsing as we speak. Will they disappear? Well, we'll have to see if they give up office. Of course, this week we've seen the illegal release of the party list that came out over the weekend. It's still Sunday here, now Monday morning here, but still Sunday for me. I haven't gone to bed yet. And we've seen that come out this weekend, criminal acts being committed by members of the Independent Electoral Commission, once again undermining its credibility completely. And they exposed the MK party and the ANC's party list made available to the public. This is a crime, and this person is responsible. This should be rooted out. Now, I want to know who's on the list too, but the ANC is releasing their list today, Monday, the 11th of January of March 2024. So there you have it, folks. Welcome to those in the audience. Let me say hello to everybody in the audience very quickly. Then we're going to get to the slides and talk about a few news items here specifically tied to this. Courtney McBride is here. Hey, Courtney, I don't know if you've already deployed or you're still doing the mail. Welcome to you. For Courtney, if he's still here, he's a couple hours behind me, so it's a reasonable hour for him. Sargon Lunderstedt says, hey, what are you doing up at midnight? Sargon, I am up at this hour frequently. I have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of tasks to do. At this hour, I was doing things for the Veterans Organization, as well as also sending some information off to a volunteer for my political campaign and prepping for tomorrow. Busy day tomorrow. So I'm often up at this hour. For those who remember the heady days of live streaming during the scam lockdown, I was frequently up as I was the only journalist who covered extensively live coverage of Senegal 2, Brockenfell, the Witkois Monument, Black Monday. All of those events I covered. All of them, including the events, including the Phoenix March. I covered all those events. No one else did that. Only I did that. No South Africans did that. No South African media covered all those events. I covered all of them, and that frequently meant that I was up in an ungodly hour, not to mention other protests I covered in South Africa during that time frame. So let's see who else we got here. Peter John Vost is back. Good morning. Good to see you there. Garrett is here. Welcome to you. George Steinberg, Marilyn Brokenshaw, Bernard. Good morning. Janet Liddy in from South Carolina. She's also up late. And Courtney says, if I deploy, it won't be until August. Okay, gotcha. And Keith Alderson is in from the UK. He's definitely up early. Keith is up early, as it's only after 5 o'clock in the UK. But it's good to see you there, Keith. All right, so let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. News breaking today, the Brenthurst survey coming out, and this is right in line with what I said. Now, the two wild cards in this is when I made my prediction in November of 2021, predicting, it appears correctly, that the ANC would get no better than 38 to 42%, and hoping they would drop as low as 33, that my predictions were spot on. I expected the economy to get worse, unemployment to get worse, crime to be worse, and then I expected load shedding to be ramped up. But who could predict how bad load shedding has become? I didn't think it was going to be this bad, but I knew it was going to be bad. All of those factors together seem to be, to me, as an analyst, sufficient to drive the ANC down to a level. Also, the ANC keeps relying on the fossils. Well, the revolution and transformation, and we freed the country, and apartheid, and unfunded back. That stuff doesn't fly with born frees. Some idiots, yes, but most born frees just want a decent, safe place to live and a way to earn their way through life. They don't want fees must fall. They want to earn their way, most folks. But that crowd that wants the free stuff is not nearly as large as the ANC thinks it is. And this is a problem for them. And it shows in the polls now, because guess who is losing their space here? The EFF. They also, if this poll is accurate, are collapsing. Now, we've seen a lot of polls of late that said the EFF was at 17 and 19%. One poll even said they were a bigger opposition party now than the Democratic Alliance, and I called horse manure, and I still call horse manure. There aren't enough stupid South Africans to vote for the EFF, guaranteed. No more than 15% of those who bother to go to vote will vote for the EFF. This latest poll puts them at 10%, which seems a very likely figure. I had them at 12 to 15%, worst case. I say worst case, which means a higher number for them. So let's get into the numbers right here, folks. This is from the Brenthurst Foundation. Let's come over here. And this is a survey of South African voter opinion from the Brenthurst Foundation. Whoops, that's not what I want right there. Sorry about that. Alrighty, now we've got it. There you go. Survey of South African voter opinion, March 2024, the Brenthurst Foundation. All right, so we're going to get into this. It's a nationally representative survey by phone, And margin of error is 3%, 95% confidence level. It's a little lower than I thought. The field work on this was actually in February. This is in February. This is before some of the by-elections. So it went to the 28th, so that's been 2 weeks ago. It ended, and it didn't include the latest by-election in which the MK party got 28%. It was a 15-minute questionnaire, and this is based on a 66% turnout from the 2019 election, which wasn't 66%. That's a lie. That's not 66% of eligible voters. That was of registered voters. But anyway, so the general election. So, all right. This is what they say is going to happen. The ANC would get 39%, right in line with my 38 to 42% prediction, folks. 39%, making it the largest party. The multi-party charter, and combined, right now would get 33%. Not enough to govern, as I said. They would need partners. Inside there, you have the Democratic Alliance with 27%. MK Party, which did not exist just a few months ago, is polling at 13% nationwide. The EFF at 10%, and the Inkatha Freedom Party, the big loser here, as Zulus flock to Jacob Zuma and MK at 2%. And then other parties, putting them all together, comes up to 5%. Now, that is if the election were held today, but of course it's in May, so a lot can happen. The DA is the only major party that's increased its share since last year. Now, this survey covers November 2022, October 2023, and February 2024. If they included 2021, you would see that the ANC had 46%. Then they dropped in 2022 to 44, to 2023 to 41, and now at 39%, right in line with my expectations. The multi-party charter actually had 36% in October after it was announced last August. However, it's lost 3%, but that 3% loss has everything to do with Action SA and with the Inkatha Freedom Party losing support. The MK Party, which did not exist, now is polling at 13% in February 2024. The Economic Freedom Fighters went from 11% in 2022 to 17% in 2023, and now they're at 10%. The Inkatha Freedom Party, 5 increased to 7%. They're back down to 2%. Could be the death knell for the Inkatha Freedom Party, which is a shame. The Inkatha Freedom Party has actually shown that it can govern municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal, and the reward they're going to get for that is the betrayal of people who vote for identity, not for capacity, not for competence. And this is unfortunate. Millions of South Africans still vote based on idiocy, and I'll see the same thing in my election. My election here. You see people vote for someone because they went to school with them. That's not a reason to vote for someone. That's not the best candidate. You vote for the best candidate who will serve the people best. But South Africans don't do that. Americans don't do that. People stupidly waste their vote oftentimes. And that is what is happening here. As people flock to MK, a party without a headquarters, without a charter, without a manifesto, without any bylaws, without any financial structure whatsoever, a party that is vaporware, essentially does not exist, and yet people are flocking to it. Why? Because Jacob Zuma is a Zulu, and he's wildly popular amongst Zulu who are low information voters, and that's a tragedy for South Africans. But it's also a bigger tragedy for the ANC. But look for MK to team up with the ANC. If the ANC right now gets 39% and MK gets 13%, that's enough to govern right there. They don't even need the EFF, so they can govern. So the fact that they've hurt the IFP, they've lost 5%, that's devastating. The fact that they've hurt Action SA, who've lost 2%, that's devastating. That's 7% of the electorate who have departed from two multi-party charter parties, and instead of 36%, they'd be over 40% right now. They'd be over 40%, and the ANC would be below 30%, and there would be no MK. It's a shame. It's a tragedy. So let's continue on. In Gauteng, and this is the place where I said the battlegrounds are Gauteng and KZN. In 2021, I said that they would lose the Western Cape as per the norm, and that they would also lose Gauteng, which they barely hung on to last time, which is 50 point something of the vote. I said they would lose it for sure in 2024. And in the past several months, and after the insurrection in 2021, I said it's likely that they will lose KwaZulu-Natal to the IFP and DA. Well, now this is what KwaZulu-Natal actually looks like. The multi-party charter is the largest grouping politically in Gauteng, and we'll talk about KZN shortly. In Gauteng, the multi-party charter has 38% of the vote, not enough to govern. ANC is down to just 34% of the vote in the most populous and wealthiest province of South Africa, just 34% for the ANC. The Democratic Alliance holding steady at 32%. The EFF is down to 11%. The MK Party, shockingly, now remember, there's a lot of Zulu living in Gauteng, even though Zulu aren't from the High Veld. They are 6%. Action SA at 5%, its strongest province. Bosa, this is Musi Maimani, is it not? 5%, other parties at 5%, and 2% of those said, I'm not voting. Wow. Wow. I'm not voting. That's crazy. That's crazy. You guys keep acting like I never broadcasted this hour. I broadcast this hour frequently. In Gauteng, the DA has gained 8 points since last October, and the EFF has fallen by 7. That is a significant development in Gauteng. So the multi-party charter up to 38%. The ANC has dropped to 34% from 37 in October. And the DA, which was at just 24%, is back to 32%. Now, they were at 34% a while back, so this is not great news, but it is better news for the DA, which was having trouble there. The EFF, which had surged to 18%, has dropped back to 11%, and as I said, the MK at 6%. That's a bit of a shocker. Action SA was 11%. They're down to 5%. Now, that is bad news. So if you take the events of November 2022, if there were a multi-party charter then, which there wasn't, you would have 34% for the DA. You would have 11% for Action SA. That's 45%. And with a few other parties, they could have governed. Now it's a little more challenging. The multi-party charter only has 38. That's 7% less than they had a while back before they existed. So that's what's going on in Gauteng. But the ANC's house is collapsing, ladies and gentlemen. It is collapsing. And here it is in KZN. This is where the ANC dies, in KwaZulu-Natal. And it is a direct consequence of the internal insurrection in the ANC when Jacob Zuma was found guilty of contempt of court, his arrogance, his asshattery. He was finally found guilty. And the little game that the ANC played, not arresting him, pretending to arrest him, letting him do what he wanted to do. And this allowed the country to go up in flames. And since then, they've been in trouble. So in KwaZulu-Natal, the multi-party charter has the most votes. Right now, in KwaZulu-Natal, the MPC is the largest coalition. However, the biggest party, according to this poll, is the MK party. The largest party in KwaZulu-Natal is a party that did not exist a few months ago. Jacob Zuma's MK is the largest party in KwaZulu-Natal. 1 out of 4 voters will vote for MK. The ANC, 1 in 5 voters, just 20%. The two of them together will not be able to govern in this province, even if they team up. That's only 45%. They will not make it. The DA at 19%, which is a pretty good showing for this province, and the IFP at 19%. That's 38% right there. EFF at 14%, a decent showing so far. Wow. So KZN is going to be ungovernable, and what's going to happen is that the MPC is going to have to align with somebody, or something's going to shake out here. But that's KwaZulu-Natal. The ANC is dead in KZN. And they're dying in Gauteng. They've been dead in the Western Cape for a long time where they can barely manage 1/3 of the vote. 1/3 of the vote. So between October of last year and February this year, the ANC dropped 12 points and the IFP dropped 8 points. That's 20 points in that swing. Who benefited from it? Well, MK, 25%. Wow, look at that. The IFP was at 27% in October, and the DA was at 19, 27, 37, 46% between the two of them. And now, look at this. The multi-party charter was at 46% in October. Now it's at 39%. And the ANC and the EFF and the multi-party charter have all suffered. MK with 25% of the vote. Yes, Menage a Trois, I've heard that story many, many times. Well, I think 2020 proves it. The only vote that matters is the person counting votes. I think that was 2020 made that clear. In the Western Cape, the Democratic Alliance continues to pull over 50%. Many have predicted its demise below 50%. I'm not one of those people. I said they would get over 50%, but 53% is where they're trending, and that's a bit close to the mark. They want to be higher than that. But the multi-party charter, 55%, and that's because the DA has 53%, the ANC at 35%, EFF at just 5%. In the Western Cape. That's one of the places where they have the least success. And of course, one of the places where they try to cause the most chaos because members of parliament work there and don't have far to travel to destroy cars and try to burn down houses in Brockenfell. Yeah. The ANC gained 13 points in the Western Cape. That's a bit of a shocker. This doesn't make any sense. This is the one outlier that makes no sense whatsoever. How does the ANC go from 22% last year to 35% now unless people are flooding into the province intentionally who are ANC voters? Kind of like Californians flooding into Texas and Florida to destroy those two states. Yeah. Well, their friend and party will not do very much at all, LMC. Hey, welcome, LMC. Thinking ahead of the next election. Here you go. So this is a shocking development here. This should scare the Democratic Alliance, which had 56% in 2022 and 2023. They're down to 53%. And this is shocking because the ANC has gone from 13 to 22 to 35. It's an outlier. It's an outlier. How does the ANC, a thoroughly corrupt kleptocracy, thieving, race hustling, criminal enterprise that ought to be charged with racketeering, how does it go from 13% of the vote in the Western Cape to 35%? That makes no sense whatsoever. None whatsoever. Even if you're unhappy with the Democratic Alliance, there are other options. How does that happen? Well, it happens because other parties have declined markedly. One example probably would be the Cape Independence Party, which in 2019 polled 15,000 votes. And according to news reports, which I can't confirm, News 24 claims that the Cape Independence Party had only 200 virtual signatures a few days before they had to turn in 15,000. So that would be one example of parties. The Good Party is probably imploded as well, and a host of others. This is very disconcerting that the ANC is actually increased in this province when they're collapsing elsewhere. I would understand where the ANC gained votes in Mpumalanga, Northwest, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape. That's understandable. But the ANC gaining votes in the Western Cape doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So this one's the one that's got me scratching my head. I can't explain it. Yeah. And what's really strange about this is that 32% indicate that the Western Cape, where 12.5% of the population lives, is South Africa's best governed province. So 1 out of 3 voters say the best province in South Africa is the Western Cape, and then 18% for Gauteng. So basically, half the country says the 2 best places to live are Gauteng and the Western Cape. And I have to be honest, I can't disagree with that. 22% refused to answer. Just 1% said the Northern Cape is the best place to live. There must be people living in Uppington. All right, let me get to the chat and see what people have to say. Does Freedom Front shot at picking seats? No, I don't think so, Courtney. Based on these results, the Freedom Front Plus has got very high negatives, which are unwarranted. It's because of propaganda and people making false claims about the party that it's some sort of racist organization, which it's not. The Freedom Front Plus has not done a good job at changing that image of itself. You cannot grow your party by simply being a party where white voters flee to. Now, I'm not picking on the Freedom Front Plus. They do have black members and color members, but it's a party that is known primarily for its white membership. And you can't be a party that's simply looking to grow from that base. That base is simply too small. Too small. You must grow in a multi-party rainbow coalition if you want to be a national party of any influence. Look at the DA. The DA would be nothing without colored voters. It would not exist. It'd be nothing. Nothing. Just the old white, screaming, screeching liberals that they're from the Liberal Party back in the day. And there's not many of them. So you have to have a broad base. The ACDP appeals to blacks, whites, coloreds. The Freedom Front Plus must do a better job. They don't stand a chance of gaining much here. I thought they could in 2019, but they've not made the strides they needed to. And that's unfortunate for them and unfortunate for South Africans because it's a decent party. That crowd is big. Zuma is saying change the country, with ANC saying they'll make it ungovernable. Yeah, exactly. I would love to see who the funders are for MK. Well, probably the same people that fund the ANC and the EFF, all of whom are profiting from chaos. I don't know who, but just ask yourself, when you have such high crime rates and everything's at risk, who benefits from that? Gate manufacturers, alarm companies, security companies, response companies, weapons manufacturers. All these people profit immensely from this. Just saying, just saying. Any prediction for referendum party? I don't think the referendum party will do much of anything, LMC. Sorry, Phil Craig was a guest in my program. Nice guy, I like him. But it's a bit late in the game, and they should have started a year ago when Neil de Beer launched his campaign in February of 2023. That's when the referendum party should have done it. They are not going to go very far, I don't think. But they might surprise me. We'll see. Maybe they'll get around 1% of the vote. Ben Labaskakny says, do you think that conservative black folk are beginning to make their mark, perhaps, like they have in the USA? I think that there's a number of them, absolutely. You've got folks like Koketso Ratsani, and you've got libertarians like Dumo Denga that have got their heads screwed on straight. But that's still a small element. Most of the black middle class got there not because of their talent, but because of patronage. And therefore, they don't know what it's like to be self-made. They don't know what it's like to earn their way. They don't know what it's like to create on your own. Instead, they got there through patronage, and so that's the system they support. So that's the majority of the black middle class. Some black middle class are self-made South Africans. And it's a shame because the entire black middle class during the apartheid era was self-made. People like Herman Mashaba. He wasn't a beneficiary of government benefits. He was a man who made it on his own. He's a man who, with great business acumen, became very successful and very wealthy under the National Party's regime. And now most blacks who have money in South Africa didn't get there legitimately. I'm sorry. It's a statement of fact, folks. When someone gives you a contract you didn't earn, that's not legitimate. When someone gives you a contract because your skin is black or because it's white, that's not legitimate. You didn't earn that. That's not based on merit or quality or delivering a service. That's based on patronage. So that's a problem. That's a problem. So Ava Tick's model says ANC are getting their COSA voters in the Western Cape through migration. Yeah, that's been going on for a long time, though. But that doesn't explain such a doubling of ANC support in Western Cape. That just doesn't explain that in such a short period of time. Does the National Party still have only sway in South Africa? No. No, the National Party is the ANC. That's the irony. The National Party renamed itself the New National Party, and then they joined the ANC. The guy that ran the party merged them with the ANC in the late 1990s. There is no national party. LMC said, I saw that over the weekend people were collecting signatures to have Phil Craig deported. Well, that's just silly. That's just silly. I'll tell you what, is anybody collecting signatures to have Europeans deported and to have the Nguni-speaking peoples deported? All these intruders into the Khoi and San lands. Yeah, can we get some signatures for that one? That's just silly. That's just silly. I presume that Phil Craig is a South African, so how are you going to deport a South African citizen? Yep. Yeah, so Western Cape is the only province that people believe is better governed since last year. Western Cape was at 28% 2 years ago, 29% last year, at 32%. Gauteng has dropped by 1%. KZN has gone from 11 to 9%. Only 6% of respondents said the Eastern Cape is well governed, 5% for Limpopo, 4% from Mpumalanga, 3% for the Free State, 1% for Northwest, and Northern Cape, 1%, which was 0 for 2 years running. That's impressive. LMC says Freedom Front Plus always have their posters in Afrikaans. They also have them in English. You're not correct, LMC. I've seen Freedom Front Plus posters in English, but they really should have posters in Venda and especially in Tswana and Xhosa. If they put their posters up in Tswana and Xhosa, that would go a long way to helping them. Most of what the Freedom Front Plus believes in are actually values that legitimate Black South Africans actually believe in. Believe in faith and family. And it's so they're missing the mark here. Once again, my service is available after my election campaign if you want to hire me for campaign advice. I saw that over the weekend people were, I already read that. Are you putting there again? Or the chat's coming in slow. How does the government win with 0% approval? Yeah, well, that's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah, well, that's because people vote. They don't vote. I mean, listen, okay, so let me just put this in context for you. I was in Northwest, and the Forum for Democrats, the party that I helped overcome the cheating by the IEC, who defrauded them out of a seat, and then I say defrauded because they refused to listen to their appeal. In that election in Zeerust, in that election in 2021, someone incorrectly took the number of 19 votes for the EFF in a ward and wrote 191. As a consequence, the EFF got a proportional seat in Zeerust, which they were not entitled to. It actually should have gone to the Forum for Democrats. Michael Atkins, an elections analyst, identified that. I interviewed him, and then I interviewed the party and the election analyst contacted them, and both of them were told by the IEC, foot sec, it's too late. But that's not South African law. A mistake like that must be corrected whenever it's discovered, even if it's 2 months before the next election. So I got lawyers and NGOs involved, and I hosted the meeting, got them together, they sent a letter, and then they rescinded that thing. So the Forum for Democrats, I went up to visit them. They took me out to visit a remote village south of Zeerust in Northwest. I went there. It's a disused slate mine. The person who owns the land allowed the people to live there for free, and they made an informal settlement there. The ANC has provided no piped water to them, no sewage for them, no electricity for them, and it's been 30 years. And the ANC used to provide a mobile clinic for them. They stopped providing that because they stole all the money. There's no money for the mobile clinic now. So I went out there and I interviewed a lady in Tswana. Now, my Tswana is not great. It's rudimentary at best, and I've forgotten most of it because I don't live in Botswana anymore. So I had the attorney who is in the party for Forum Democrats. She was my interpreter as I interviewed the lady. So I interviewed her, lovely lady. She's been there since the beginning the village was founded over 30 years ago. And I said to her, listen, may I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, do you vote? She said, yes, of course I vote. I said, excellent. I vote in every election too. That's awesome. We should always vote. I said, do you mind if I ask you who you vote for? She said, you can ask. I vote for the ANC. And I said, why do you vote for the ANC? She said, because I'm supposed to. Because I'm supposed to. That explains in Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, Northwest, that because I'm supposed to. Because I'm supposed to. The ANC has brainwashed and indoctrinated voters to believe that the ANC actually won them freedom. It's the biggest lie since Joe Biden in 81 million. Or before, up until 81 million, that was the biggest lie going. The ANC did not bring liberation to South Africa. They did not. They were a non-factor. The biggest impact they had was murdering people in KwaZulu-Natal with the People's War, necklacing people, killing so-called informers who were just innocents. Remember Stumpy? Say his name. Winnie Mandela, hailed as a heroine by Julius Malema, the woman responsible for the kidnapping and murder of Stumpy, a 14-year-old boy. Why? Because he was in the way. He was an informant, but he wasn't an informant. That's just a lie. So how does the government win with 0%? Because people vote on identity. And like I said, the lady, lovely lady, I'm not faulting her, but that's what she's grown up with. That's what she's been told. Since she got the vote, it's her responsibility to vote for the ANC. So she does. Despite the fact that she lives in abject poverty with no sewage, with no pipe water, with no electricity, with no paved road, with no hope, with no jobs, living off a grant. Which, of course, the ANC claims that they gave her. But the ANC has no money. Remember, the ANC wouldn't pay 102 million rand debt in November. And the sheriff went to Luthuli house to inventory their property, to confiscate it because they couldn't pay their debt. But then suddenly they had 102 million in December to pay off that debt. And suddenly, by the way, they look at their bank accounts. We have the records. The sheriff in Gauteng went to Luthuli house, went to the bank, and all their bank accounts totaled up $5,000 US. $5,000 US. A national party the size of the ANC had $5,000 to its name. Couldn't pay 102 million rand. And then suddenly, 102 million rand, and then they held a big 112th anniversary celebration in Mpumalanga at Nelspruit. And guess what? That cost 20 million rand. That's 122 million rand. And now they have money to posters, to run around the country doing campaign events. Why? Because they steal from the taxpayer. And they admitted it. You know, people for years have been claiming that the ANC is stealing government money to provide buses for their voters, to provide KFC three-piece streetwise meals. And they admitted it. A member, the ANC senior member, just said, yeah, of course. Of course. This is what happens. We parastatals are ordered to order millions of meals from KFC. So that fix is in. KFC profits from the illicit theft of money by the ANC, from the taxpayer. Wow. And did you mention the lady was a lawyer? Huh? What are you talking about, Benjamin? Did you see elections being generally fair? Figures don't make any sense in few provinces. No, they don't make any sense, Bernard. This is a poll. It's not an election. They don't make any sense in the Western Cape. Yep. So let's continue on. The DA's reputation has climbed. Now, this is what kills me. The ANC has a reputation for good governance. How does anybody in their right mind think the ANC is good governance? Nonetheless, the DA and the ANC both at 33%, the DA's reputation. So which party do you believe is the most effective at governing? The ANC and DA equally at 33%, the EFF at 9%, the IFP at 5%, Action SA at 1%, and Freedom Front Plus at 1%, which is comical because none of those parties, except the IFP, the DA, and the ANC, actually govern anywhere. The ANC, 33% effective. That's crazy. That's just crazy. Now, the DA has increased. This is their best showing in the past 3 years. The ANC is down a few percent. So, how do you view parties? Are you favorable? Now, this is interesting. The ANC is a favorable rating. It's exactly what they polled at, 39%. The DA at 37%, which is significantly higher than they're polling at. And the MK at 24%, EFF 24%. That's surprising. IFP at 16%. The Freedom Front Plus is 9% favorable. Action SA 8%, BOSA 6%, MPC 5%, and Rise Mzansi at 4%. But unfavorables, it doesn't go so well for some of these parties. Yep. Yeah, so let's get to that. Strongly and somewhat unfavorable. This is unfavorable. So the EFF tops out. 54% of those polled think the EFF is a horrible party. 46% to the IFP, 43% for the ANC. That is bad news, folks. Bad news. Freedom Front Plus coming at 40%, not great. MK at 38%. The DA, only 1/3 negative numbers. That's actually pretty good. So 2/3 of people do not think poorly of the DA. That's pretty good. Action SA at 30%. That's even better. Rise and Mzansi, which almost nobody knows about, at 20%. And they rule nowhere. And both at 16%. So there you go. Multi-party coalition altogether. Most people never heard of the multi-party charter, which I just call coalition. It has a negative 16%. That's not bad at all. So the DA, his bad numbers were really bad just a couple years ago. They've dropped from 41 to 33%, and the ANC has gone from 38 to 43% negative numbers. So the DA rises to score the highest net favorability, with the EFF losing 30%, IFP minus 30%, Freedom Front Plus minus 31%, all at the lowest. So here's what has happened from the previous poll, and you see the numbers change. The DA better, everyone else is worse, especially the Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, and EFF. EFF, this is troubling for the EFF. The IFP and the Freedom Front Plus are not major opposition parties, but the EFF is, and it's losing steam in a rapid fashion. Bad news for the EFF, which was only negative 16% last October. Now it's minus 30%. Crazy stuff. All right, so how well have you heard of these parties? This is the question a lot of people need to know. Have you heard of these parties in South Africa? The Brent Hurst Foundation survey, here you go. Have you heard of these parties? Now, of course, everyone's heard of the ANC, right? 99%. 99% of those are familiar. So you could answer multiple questions here. Have heard of the EFF? Just 97% have heard of the Democratic Alliance. Now, how is that even possible? 90% have heard of the IFP. MK, 84% of South Africans have heard of the MK party just a few months after it existed. Yet the DA has been in existence for 20 years, 25 years, and 3% of South Africans have never heard of it. The IFP, the Inkatha movement, has been around since the 1980s, and 10% of South Africans never heard of it. But it is regionally based, so it's understandable. The MK party, 84% of respondents have heard of the MK party. Now, that is in no small measure a consequence of the fact that they stole the title Umkhonto we Sizwe from the so-called armed wing of the ANC. They appropriated their name. So people know that term, and that's probably why it has such a high knowledge. So 84% of South Africans for a party that didn't even exist. The Freedom Front Plus, 26% of South Africans have never heard of the Freedom Front Plus. Yet they had a minus 30% approval rating. That's just crazy. Action SA still has a bridge to climb. 42% of South Africans have never heard of Action SA. Now, how do you win an election like that? Almost half the election never heard of you. And Rise and Mzansi, only 36% of people have heard of Musi Maimani's group. Bosa at 36%. And the multi-party charter, this is a disaster as well. The multi-party charter, just 32% of South Africans are aware of the event that I covered in August of last year at Emperor's Palace in Kempton Park. Just 1 in 3 voters has even heard of the multi-party charter. John Steenhuisen, Neil de Beer, Velancosi Labisa. Are you listening, gentlemen? Are you listening? You need to do more to let people know about the multi-party charter. So, that's an interesting poll. All right, so these are the ratings for favorable, strongly and somewhat favorable. Now, this is a disaster for everybody, including the ANC. Not a single one of these public figures polls better than 50%. Shockingly, people are idiots. 46% of South Africans have a favorable opinion of Cyril Ramaphosa. What planet are they on? Honestly, what planet are these people living on? Are they living on planet Reebok? Because it's clearly not South Africa. How could anybody other than a cadre, a cater, a corrupt ANC politician have any positive view of Cyril Ramaphosa whatsoever? Mr. Munir Palapala, the man who promised to bring $100 billion of foreign direct investment to South Africa. Well, that was in 2018. South Africa's seen a net outflow of hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign direct investment. Yes, they announced new deals, but they don't tell you about all the ones that are left. Not to mention the net outflow of cash, the delisting on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange of company after company after company to go to London or New York. It's crazy. Cyril Ramaphosa promised everything. He would end corruption. Corruption is worse today than it was under Jacob Zuma. He promised he would have responsible government, yet billions, trillions of rand disappear. PPE theft. And he promised a party that would deliver South Africans. And today, more people live in poverty than when Cyril Ramaphosa became president. Yet somehow, 46% of these morons said he's a good leader. So here you go. Favorable opinions somewhat or strongly favorable opinion of these figures. So, Cyril Ramaphosa, 46%. Jacob Zuma, 29%. That's comical. Julius Malema, this is a frightening one, 25%. Helen Zilla, 25%. Musi Maimani, 20%. How can anybody have a positive view of Musi Maimani? Nobody knows what it stands for. John Steenhuisen, 19%. That should worry the DA. 19%. Not even all DA voters have a positive view of John Steenhuisen. Herman Mashaba, just 13%. Peter Hernevald, 8%. Now, it's interesting that Peter Hernevald, now this is the one winner here. Mashaba, I suppose you could say, is a winner too, because his party's only polling about 2 or 3%, yet 13% have a favorable opinion of him. Peter Hernevald, a party that's going to get maybe 2% of the vote, 2.5%, has an 8% favorable rating. He's actually doing well. People who actually listen to Peter Hernevald realize that he's a good leader. And Velinkosi Hlabisa, who's also a good leader, is getting just 5%. But that's trending about where the IFP's at. So Hernevald is overperforming. Mashaba is overperforming. Steenhuisen is way underperforming. Musi Maimani is way overperforming. Helen Zilla is performing above because she's not even in the fray. Malema is overperforming. Jacob Zuma is overperforming. And Cyril Ramaphosa is a disaster. Even at 46%, it's a disaster. He seems like a nice man. They call him Cupcake, but he's a bad president. He's a horrible president, LMC. For once, we agree on something. It's probably because ANC stands in Israel. You know what, LMC? You make a very good point in the Western Cape. You make a very good point in Western Cape. The DA has probably lost colored voters who are Muslims, who will support the ANC now because of its racist, anti-Semitic, Jew-hating position. Once again, I'll point this out. The ANC. Where is the ANC in joining the Gambia in the genocide ICJ case against Myanmar? Nowhere to be found. Where is the ANC standing up for the Rohingya in Myanmar? Nowhere to be found. Where is the ANC standing up for the Uyghurs who are being wiped out by the Chinese in communist China? Nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be said. Where is the ANC in Tigray, Somalia, Sudan? They're whining. They went back to the ICJ again this week and said, oh, the Israelis are starving the Palestinians. But they're silent on black Africans being starved in Sudan. The World Food Program says it's the world's largest food crisis. The RSF and General Burhan are killing each other and starving Sudanese. But where's the ANC at the ICJ for that? Where is the ANC at the African Union for that? Where is the ANC anywhere? They're just frauds. They're total frauds. Somebody's paying them to flap their jaws at the International Court of Justice. And that somebody, probably, we can guess fairly, is Tehran, their fellow traveling partners. So you have a point, LMC. That I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point, and I'll keep that in mind. I'll take a closer look at it because I just looked at these numbers just before I went live, so I hadn't really thought about it. But yeah, it would explain why in the Western Cape the ANC is more popular suddenly, and the DA has lost support. But the ANC hasn't lost a lot of support. The ANC has picked up a lot of support at the expense of other parties, and that's a shame. That's a shame. Palestine Israel is probably a plot. Oh, it definitely is, LMC. You're spot on, man. LNC, what are you drinking tonight, man? Did you have one of my Starbucks? You know, you always write nasty things and make silly points just to be, challenging on my videos. But tonight, you're spot on. Your comments are rational. They make sense. Well done, LMC. Cheers to you. Yeah, it is a plot. I said that from the very beginning. There is no way that Hamas, in their wildest dreams, ever thought that on October 7th they would defeat the state of Israel. They didn't have enough. They sent 8,000 people across the border. That is not going to defeat the Israelis. There's no chance in that. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to provoke a response from Israel, an overreaction to get global condemnation, to break the Abraham Accords, to destroy the Abraham Accords, the historic Abraham Accords negotiated by Jared Kushner and Donald Trump, which brought peace to the Middle East, which was never seen before. Morocco restored relations which had been frozen for decades with Israel. United Arab Emirates established diplomatic relations for the first time with Israel. Sudan reestablished diplomatic relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia established diplomatic relations with Israel. The entire Arab world was coming at peace with Israel. So Hamas, at the behest of Tehran, who funded them, invaded, raped, slaughtered, murdered, butchered, beheaded, disfigured, cut the breast off, executed people. They did that. Not because they thought they'd win, but because they wanted to discredit Israel and cause the Abraham Accords to fall apart. And they're very successful. It's like the Tet Offensive in 1968. I'm the only analyst that's been saying this from the very beginning. Tell me one other analyst that's telling you this. I've said it from the very beginning. That was the purpose. That was the strategic purpose of crossing the border on October 7th. It wasn't victory. The Palestinians don't care. Hamas doesn't care how many Palestinians die. Their leaders are sitting in Dubai, in luxury hotels with big beer bellies, enjoying themselves, drinking alcohol and sleeping with multiple women, and professing their love of Palestinians while sending them to their deaths. That's the bottom line there. So, good news for Ellen Zilla, 25%. That's not bad considering she's not even in a position. So, let's see what's happened in the numbers with these figures. So, from, again, 2022 to 2023 to 2024, Ramaphosa has been on seesaw. He was at 48%, then down to 42%. He's back to 45%. Jacob Zuma wasn't even in the poll. He's at 29%. Malema is at 25%, then 31%, back down to 25%. Helen Zilla's gone from 22 to 24 to 25. Musi Maimani has dropped from 22 to 20. John Steenhuisen's actually climbed from 17 to 19, and Herman Mashaba has declined by 1%. Peter Groenewald was actually at 14% in October. What happened between October and now that it's dropped from 14 to 8%? And Hlabisi's been pretty steady. And there you go. Zongezo Zibi, whoever he is, has 1% approval rating. So there you go. What else they got here? Jacob Zuma is viewed most unfavorably among politicians tested. So here's the unfavorable, okay? Those were favorable ratings, okay? These are unfavorable ratings. So most of these guys are underwater. Jacob Zuma has a 60% disapproval rating. Malema has a 54% disapproval rating. Musi Maimani at 42%. Cyril Ramaphosa is a 39%, so he's slightly above. Helen Zilla is at 39%. That's not good for Herman Mashaba has a 31% disapproval. And Peter Groenewald has a 26%. Why does Peter Groenewald have a 26% disapproval rating? The only excuse for why someone would think that Peter Groenewald is not a good leader is if they're a racist and they just hate white people. I mean, why else would someone think he's a bad leader? What has Peter Groenewald ever done to harm South Africans? He stood up for South Africans of all stripes, all colors, all faiths, all religions. He's never done anything. So why would you have an unfavorable opinion of Peter Groenewald? He's such a nice gentleman. That's just nonsense. Velenkosi Labisa, 17% unfavorable. That's actually pretty good for him. And then Songizi Zibi has a 14%. So, approval. Anyway. All right. So, yeah. So, here's the net between the negative and the positive. Everyone's underwater except for Cyril Ramaphosa, who's above, which is just comical. Cyril Ramaphosa at 46% is above because it was 39% unfavorable. John Steenhuisen is at minus 6%, and Labis at minus 12, Helen Zilla minus 14, then Mashab minus 18, Groenewald minus 18, and Julius Malema is at minus 29, Jacob Zuma minus 31. So Zuma and Malema are wildly unpopular, but it doesn't matter because Jacob Zuma is the disruptor. He is disrupting things in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, and he's causing the ANC massive chest pains, as he should. All right. So we already did the recognized names. What's going on here? Oh. All right, so this is the response to how are things going in South Africa. The Brent Hurst Foundation survey found the following. How are things going in South Africa? Well, folks, not so good. 80% of those polled said things are wrong. 17% said things are right. Those are all cadres and BEE recipients. And 3% said they don't know or just simply refuse to answer the question. 80%. 8 in 10 South Africans say things are dorked up. Unemployment, corruption are the biggest problems. I'm surprised to see that South Africans actually care about corruption. That's a shocker. Unemployment at 28% is the biggest problem. Corruption at 27%. Load shedding at 17%. Weak leadership at 12%. Crime at 11%. That is shockingly low. I would have thought crime would have polled higher than corruption. A failed political system, just 4%. Poor policy, 1%. Well, the poor leadership and the failed political system are a consequence of, or poor policy, a consequence of that. So why did it do so poorly? You think it would be higher. Okay, so corruption has actually climbed to 27%. It was down to 24% last time. And weak leadership has climbed. Yep. So who is most responsible for this problem? Okay, ready for this? See, this is why the EFF, MK, and the ANC have a losing ticket, because they continue to beat poor Jan van Riebeck. Oh, Jan van Riebeck, apartheid, colonialism, neocolonialism, the whites stole everything. Nobody cares about that except racists. And that's a small number of South Africans. So who is most responsible for the country's problems? The ANC government the last 3 decades, 53% of respondents said the ANC. That means that over half the country blames them. Only 11% blame apartheid. 8% actually blame the Constitution. 6% blame the BE elite. That's shocking. 6% blame racists. Those are probably the racists themselves. Only 1% blame the DA. That is incredibly good news for the DA. And 9% refused to answer. But only 11% blame apartheid. So poor Jan van Riebeck. Only 11% of people actually blame him. And that's good news because that's the truth. There are some legacy things of the National Party era that are still responsible for some of the shortcomings in South Africa, but very few. Most of this is a consequence of the ANC itself. Yeah. So one example would be spatial displacement. People who couldn't live in certain places and a consequence couldn't build wealth in those terrible neighborhoods, and decades later still having a challenge building that wealth. Yeah. So interesting. Now, the scary part is that people blaming apartheid is actually up. So maybe it's working for them. It was 9% in 2022. It dropped to 5% in 2023, and now it's 11%. Why would it be 11% now? It doesn't make any sense. Why would it jump from 5 to 11% from October to now, blaming apartheid? Apartheid has been gone for 30 years. Why you suddenly change your mind? Makes no sense whatsoever. All right, coalitions. Would South Africans be happy to see a coalition govern? Would they? Well, that's a good question. Well, 76% of those responding to the survey said yes. They'd be happy to see a coalition. Apparently, they've never heard of Italy. 21% said no, they didn't want to see a coalition. Apparently, the 76% of respondents have never heard of Italy, and it's dozens and dozens and dozens of post-war governments that collapsed and led to paralysis in Italy for decades. They're apparently unfamiliar with that situation. Yeah. Okay. So this is where the coalition poll has been consistent. Since 2022, it's 79 to 74, back to 76. And no vote was 19, 23, and then 21 is most recent. So people are in favor of a coalition. Which coalition would you prefer? Now, this one's interesting. So 29% say they would be in favor of the multi-party charter, which is good. Good news for the multi-party charter. 25% would favor an ANC-DA, which is a likely coalition, quite frankly, despite the DA's protestations to the contrary. And 24% say they would like to see an ANC-EFF coalition. Now, those people are crazy. They're bat crap crazy. 24% would like to see an EFF coalition. But that's down from 31%. Yep. Over a quarter of South Africans are more likely to vote for the opposition since the MPC's launch. That's good news for the multi-party charter. That is good news, but they've got to get more done. 46% of those say that the formation of that charter does nothing, but 26% says they're more likely to vote for an opposition party. 23% say they're less likely to vote for an opposition party. That's interesting. So it's a wash. So I'm not really sure what the value of that poll is. The polls are very revealing about a possible disconnect between concerns and the expected choice party. Agreed, 100%. All right, respondents overwhelmingly in favor of the West and other democratic countries over the BRICS. So as the ANC continues to wheel towards the fellow travelers in Tehran, Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang, as they continue to do that foolish move against the best interests of South Africans in so many ways, South Africans are not in concert with the idiots in the ANC. People don't want the East. They want the developed West. 43% of respondents say they prefer that democratic countries of the West be where South Africa align themselves. 22% say Africa. 19% say BRICS. And 10% say don't align with any power bloc. So almost half of respondents think that they should align themselves with the West. And these are the people that have their heads screwed on straight because that's where the profit and future is for South Africa. Now, the ANC stance on Russia and Ukraine is alienating 1/4 of voters. Now, that's interesting. So let's see. No difference. 52% of respondents said they don't care about ANC's position with Russia and Ukraine. 24% say they're less likely to vote for ANC. 17% say they're more likely to vote for the ANC. So that's a net loss of about 7% for the ANC, which they can't afford. They cannot afford to lose 7% of the electorate right now. So that's hurting them. 23% of voters are less likely to vote for the ANC given its stance in Israel. Now, this is interesting. It makes me wonder if this poll is skewed towards Christians and whites because this one doesn't make sense. If, in fact, LMC's supposition or his thesis that in the Western Cape, the reason that the ANC has gained voters is because of their stance in favor of Hamas, If that's true, and I think there's merit to what LMC said, then this just doesn't make any sense. So does South Africa's policy on Israel-Hamas conflict make more or less likely to vote for the ANC? No difference, 53%. 23% said less likely, and 19% said more likely. So that's a net loss of 4%, yet in the Western Cape, they've gained a lot. So I'm not really sure which is there. ANC Zimbabwe policy will cost it more votes than it gains. So no difference is 54%. 23% said less likely, and 18% said they're more likely to vote for the ANC. South Africa's stance on Sudan. Most people don't even know, so I'm surprised. 58% said they don't care. 20% say they're less likely to vote for ANC. 14% said more likely. Domestic policy. So the best way for government to put more money in people's pockets is, you ready for this? This is interesting. This is across all racial groups and categories. 39% say make it easier to start a small business. 25% say reducing taxes. That is clearly 64% of the electorate are in favor of free market capitalism. And then 20% say increase social grants, 12% decrease the cost of civil service. So if you throw that on top of 64, that's 76%. 3 out of 4 voters are in favor of free market Western capitalist policies. Only 20%, 1 in 5 voters, is in favor of welfare. That's good news for South Africans. Yeah. But shockingly, 42% of those polled said that social grants should be increased. 29% said at the current level, and then 27% say end after a certain period. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's where that's at. So that's the poll from Brent Hurst Foundation. Let's go back to the top and give you the numbers at the very beginning for those who tuned in late. The Brent Hurst Foundation came out with its poll. Now, it's just one of many polls, but this poll is right in line with the prediction that I made in November of 2021. Not last month, not 2 weeks ago, not in October, not in January last year, not the previous year, but all the way back in November 2021 after the municipal elections, which I had the most extensive cover of any journalist in the world of that election, interviewing 8 different political parties, leaders, and members of 8 different political parties and leaders of 6 of those parties from all over South Africa, and running daily coverage of that election for the 3 months prior to the election, which I'm not doing this time because I'm also running for office, so I'm not having as much coverage this time. But I made this prediction then. And today, the Brent Hurst Foundation comes in right in the sweet spot of my prediction. I said that the ANC would get 38% to 42%. If they're lucky, 42%. I said they'll likely drop to 38%. I said I hope they go to 33%. But the Brent Hurst Foundation poll says, just one of several, says that the ANC will poll just 39% nationwide on May 29th. Multi-party charter, 33%. The Democratic Alliance themselves at 27%. MK, a party that didn't even exist a few months ago, 13%. The EFF drops to just 10%, and the IFP drops to 2%. All other parties combined reach 5% threshold. Who else is here? Let's see who else you got here. Heidi Homestead, welcome to you. Regardless of the topic, South Africa's presentation in national court, I would assume that many blacks would give a big rah-rah for South Africa's gaining world influence. Hendrik LaRue says, what people say in polls and how they vote might not correspond, as many aren't even aware of party policies. Correct, 100%. Hendrik, you are correct. That was a point I made earlier. All those Muslims opening shops, basically taking over the townships, some small towns. Blacks don't like it. It will bite the ANC eventually. Well, maybe. We'll see. What's going on if Chris is up this time? Well, Drunken Yoda, we have a new poll release that I want to take advantage of to get the word out to people. And we've had a big crowd here for the first hour. So there you go. Once again, these are the poll results. The ANC down to 39% in nationwide poll. The DA up to 27%. And the multi-party charter, which includes the DA, at 33%. So a coalition will be the outcome of that. So which party are you most likely to vote for in Gauteng? This is scary numbers for the ANC. Just 34% of Gauteng voters would vote for the ANC. The multi-party charter has 38%. The DA is up to 32%. The EFF has dropped to 11%. And the MK party at 6% is a bit surprised. So that's in Gauteng. Let's take one more look at one more province. That's KZN. And in KwaZulu-Natal, the multi-party charter is on top at 39%. MK at 25%. The ANC has dropped to 20% of the electorate in KwaZulu-Natal. That is a shocking development. It's a shocking development. There you go, folks. So we got a question here. Watched Tucker Carlson interview with Donald Trump last night. Pretty interesting. Seems USA and South have very similar problems. Yeah. We have very similar problems. That's true. What's going on over here? Oh, I just hit 100% charge on my phone. Anyway, folks, I want to get this out tonight. Yeah, it is a bit late, but that's because here in America we've jumped forward, and we are just 6 hours behind South Africa now. We were 7 hours. Now we're 6 hours. So now I do my news at noon when I do it. So tomorrow I have an extra hour to prep and take care of business. I got to go out and take care of a few things, so that helps me out. Yeah, but my program now will be at noon instead of 11 a.m., which will help me out immensely. Also, it's Daniel Robinson's balkanization similarly throughout the Americas return. What? De facto balkanization, return to the Constitution. I don't understand what you're saying, Daniel. What do you mean by that? All right, so a little bit more news before I go. Zuma's MK party could find support more than the EFF. That's right. They are more popular than the EFF. Look at this. A party that didn't exist just a few months ago. Former President Jacob Zuma's MK party could be the third largest party in the country, outperforming the EFF, according to the Brent Hurst Foundation poll, which has put them at 13% nationwide and the EFF at 10%. Wow. Wow. Now, in 2019, the EFF got 10.19% of the vote, so they're right in line with getting that again, rather than D.C. dictating. Oh, gotcha. States asserting their rights. Well, they should, but the problem is that we've allowed, with the 14th Amendment, with the 16th and the 17th Amendment, the theft of sovereignty from the states and the federal government taking over. With the 14th Amendment, which prevents the states from doing anything about insurrection, as we've just discovered from the Supreme Court, which I predicted once again correctly back when Colorado tried its nonsense. I said it would be overturned because they lack the authority. Only Congress has that based on the 14th Amendment. I was correct. And then the 16th, which of course is the imposition of income tax, and the 17th, which was stealing the senators from the state legislatures. Until the 17th Amendment, the states selected all of the members. So if you remember the Senate before 1916 or thereabouts, all the way back in our history, you were picked by your state legislatures. If that were the case today, we'd have over 60 Republican senators, and we wouldn't have the gridlock we have in Washington. But that is not the case. All right, so that one's, what else I got here? Anything else here? Yeah, the DA and Zuma's MK party are the big winners. ANC and EFF flop, according to the Brent Hurst Foundation survey. So that's not a very flattering picture of John Steenhuisen. They could have done a better job there. That's not very nice. Yeah, so the IFP promises to crack down on crime and save jobs just for South Africans. Sounds a little xenophobic. The IFP had their manifesto launched this weekend, and they've a raft of policy proposals that will grow the country's economy, cushion the poor, and end load shedding, crack down on crime. Well, good luck with that. There's a very good man there, Velenkosini Hlabisa, who's now the leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party. Of course, Mangosuthu Buthelezi was the founder. He's passed away. And one more thing to talk about before we wrap up here, folks, and that is that the Independent Electoral Commission confirms that the ANC and MK party list were illegally leaked over the weekend. The lists were submitted by the ruling party and the MK party Friday afternoon in adherence to the IEC's deadline of 5 p.m. But hours later, the ANC and MK party's national list of 200 candidates and some of the provincial lists were leaked on social media. In an interview with SABC TV, the IEC Chief Electoral Officer, Maseho Shiburi, said internal processes are underway to determine the source of the leak. Well, this is a crime, folks. It's a crime, and whoever did it should be punished and held accountable. Leaked ANC list hints at post-election cabinet shakeout. Well, I don't buy that for a second. We'll have to wait and see if that's actually the case. Yeah, so the ANC candidate list is unfortunate, says Ramaphosa. Why? You don't want us to know who's on your list because you left all the criminals on there. So the IEC explained the incident as an internal glitch with investigations underway. It remains confident in the Electoral Commission's work and processes as polls approach. Well, I remain confident the IEC will screw up a number of things, but will be largely getting it done. The ANC's list, which was exposed this weekend, continues to contain many controversial figures featured in parliamentary candidates list. So President Ramaphosa's former political advisor, Benjani Chauke, Member of Parliament, Zaomi Harvard, and former high-ranking minister Dina Pule are among the people who made it onto the list. Ministers implicated in state capture and the Zondo Commission are also on the list. It's just crazy, including Gigaba, Malusi Gigaba. Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. State Security Agency Minister Kumbudzu Natshiveni, all kinds of people who are implicated in crimes are still on the list. But the ANC did disqualify 4 people, interesting, over the state capture. Yep. It says it's disqualified 4 of its members from its public representatives who were implicated in state capture. It also included plenty of people who were implicated. There were over 90 ANC members who appeared before the party's Integrity Committee on charges related to state capture, and many who failed to show. But they were continued on the list because the ANC loves corruption. They live for corruption. Mary Sinclair says, good morning. Good morning to you, Mary. Where are you coming in from? Daniel says, how much is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict a Trojan horse for upholding UN and other initiatives for global governance? It's, again, I describe what it is. It is a strategic effort by Iran and by Hamas to destroy the Abraham Accords and isolate Israel and the United States. That's what it is. That's what it is. I don't know what you're talking about, but that's what it is. EFF, 60% jobs reserved for South Africans, 40% for foreigners, has just cost them voters and the policy of open borders. Yep. Grew up in Maryland, where Chris was at once upon a time, in PA like now. Yeah. No, I was born in Baltimore. Yep. IQ test for the country's future. Bernard, a lot of people are saying that, but really doesn't matter. Yep. Anyway, all right, folks, I think it's time for me to wrap up. Welcome, Mary Sinclair. It's time for me to wrap up. Thanks for being here. I'm going to hit the rack. I've got a lot to do on Monday. It is now Monday, 2 a.m. here. I'm going to get about 6 or 7, so I'm going to hit some rack. Oh, Mary Duplicity. Okay. Oh, so you're just playing around there. Okay, Mary. All right, thanks, everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. We still get 69 people here watching the program at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Can't wait for tomorrow's show. Well, Daniel, tomorrow's show, if I'm lucky, will be on time. We'll see how it goes, because I've got to go to the people producing things for my campaign and sort through a few things. We're about to launch a digital campaign to reach out to voters who are likely voters. And then I have a debate to prepare for Wednesday night. So that's a big one. Still don't have the link for that. These people are putting it together, haven't provided the link. I asked again tonight, and I got no answer. So, well, I got an answer. It's not ready yet. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll catch you later in the day. Be sure to hit the like button and tell people about the link. Share this link on social media. Let people know about it so they'll find this stream, and we'll get a lot more views than this. Appreciate it, folks. The ANC is imploding. And should we play taps again? Should we play taps again on the way out? Wouldn't that be cool for the ANC? The ANC imploding, the death knell of the ANC. Good night, folks. Just wishful thinking, or is it real? All I know for certain is that my prediction in November 2021 was spot on, at least as of current polling. Once again, folks, I said 38 to 42%. That was best case, 42%. 38, most likely, praying for 33%. The ANC is currently polling at 39%. Are they done? Don't count them out. Never count out a communist. They'll do anything to hold on to power. They're like Democrats. They never let go. Good night, everybody.